Well, there have been several amazing wildlife survival stories in the news recently, including 2 crazy stories of birds that survived being hit by vehicles and an elk that spent 2 years with a tire stuck around its neck. Welcome back to another travel news episode. I'm your host, Robert Witham. I'm a former newspaper journalist, but I now report on travel news. I scour the news for stories of interest to travelers and those who love the great outdoors, so you don't have to. Did you know I'm on Patreon? You can join me there for as little as $1 a month for access to behind-the-scenes photos, stories, videos, and more. And I do share a lot of stuff on Patreon that doesn't make it out to the general World Wide Web. So if you want to see it first, or if you want to see exclusive content, you may want to join me over there. So as I said, there's been a few incredible stories in the news lately about animals that somehow beat incredible odds to survive. And I think y'all will enjoy these stories. I have 3 of them today, and they're all happy stories with positive endings. It's the first up. In October, a minivan traveling on I-25 north of Denver collided with a great horned owl. The motorist was surprised upon arriving in Fort Collins to discover a live owl stuck in the engine compartment. The force of this highway-speed collision drove the owl through the plastic grill on the minivan and resulted in it becoming lodged between the grill and the radiator. Not a very comfortable place to ride from Denver to Fort Collins, obviously. A rescuer with Rocky Mountain Raptor program was able to extract the owl from the minivan without further injury. That's a project between the talons and the beak. That must have been a real project getting it out of there. Following a detailed examination at the Rocky Mountain Raptor program facility, the owl was determined to be in surprisingly good health considering its recent experience. The owl escaped the collision with a minor scratch on one eye, some abrasions and bruises, and a few cracked feathers. The owl is being rehabilitated and will be released into the wild once it is recovered. And Colorado Parks and Wildlife officers have been attempting to help a bull elk that had a tire stuck around its neck for more than 2 years. Wildlife officers made 4 attempts to tranquilize the bull elk in just 1 week in Colorado before finally being successful. After tranquilizing the elk, officers attempted to cut the tire off of the elk's neck, but were unable to cut through the steel belts. Eventually, the officers decided to cut the bull elk's antlers in an effort to remove the tire. It was still tight removing the tire over the elk's head, but they were able to successfully remove it. Wildlife officer Scott Murdoch said we would have preferred to cut the tire and leave the antlers for his rutting activity, but the situation was dynamic and we had to just get the tire off in any way possible. They said, between the weight of the tire and the crud in it, and the antlers, the elk lost like 30 pounds, 35 pounds of weight from its neck and head. And there's apparently about 10 pounds of debris in it, between water and dirt and pine needles and stuff that were inside the tire that was dangling around this elk's neck. And it had been on there for at least 2 years. They have photos of it that long, and just hadn't, because the animals in the wild hadn't been able to get close enough to tranquilize it to try and remove the tire up until October, just recently, within the last couple of weeks. So really cool they were able to finally remove that. And of course they were concerned, obviously, this is going to get hung up on something and cause the animal's premature death, or it was getting so tight as the animal grew. The elk was like 600 pounds by this point, that they were concerned it was going to choke it. So they were able to successfully remove that finally. And a third story, in late September, a red-tailed hawk was hit by a pickup truck near Hartselle, Colorado. The impact wedged the hawk into the grill of the Toyota truck. The driver pulled over and contacted Colorado Parks and Wildlife immediately, and wildlife officer Ian Petcash responded to the scene. It was lucky it only impacted the grill and not the bumper, which must have absorbed a lot of the shock, Petcash said. After extracting the hawk from the grill of the truck, it was taken to a wildlife rehabilitation facility where it was being treated for a minor wing injury. The hawk will be released into the wild once it has recovered. Well, don't forget, travelers, send me links or details or stories you think might be of interest to robert.witham@gmail.com. Thank you to those who already shared news and links. And now that you know what's going on out there, please like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and thanks for joining me this travel news episode.